Hello and welcome back to another week here at Knack Kitchen, where today we're making a chocolate tart. This is going to be a baked chocolate tart which is going to be absolutely delicious. It is going to be light, flavorful, and oh so amazing. So without wasting any more time, let's just dive into this video and see how we make this. So we're going to start by preparing our tart crust, for which I have some plain flour, some cocoa powder, some icing sugar and some almond flour. If you don't have almond flour, then you can just pulse some almonds in a mixer grinder, or you can just skip it all together and add a little more flour. And now I've gone ahead and added some cold butter. I'm using salted butter, but you can certainly use unsalted butter if you want. And we're just going to incorporate this butter into the flour mixture. Today I'm making the pastry by hand, so we're just going to rub this butter into this mixture. If you are going to make this in a food processor, then you just add this and pulse it all together until the dough starts to form clumps. By hand, it will take you about 4 to 5 minutes. The mixture will start to look like this, and as you can see, the clumps are holding shape. So at that stage, we're going to go ahead and add 1 egg, and we're going to incorporate this as well. Now, if you want, you can beat the egg beforehand before adding into this mixture. That's totally up to you. And we're going to work this into a dough, but don't knead it too much because that will make this pastry stiff. As for the consistency, we want a soft dough. So if your dough is a little too dry, just add a little water. And if it's a little too soft, then add a little flour. And like I said, this is going to be a soft dough, so we can't immediately roll this out. We have to refrigerate this for about 40 minutes. So I'm just wrapping this in cling wrap, and this goes into the refrigerator. And we're going to let this sit for at least 40 minutes to about an hour or two. So when the pastry is almost done chilling, we're just going to prepare our surface to roll it out. I'm using a pastry mat, but you can do it directly on the countertop. Make sure that you have adequate amount of flour at your disposal because the pastry is very sticky, so you'll need to keep flouring your surface. Right now the pastry is very stiff as well, so I've just given it a couple of taps with my rolling pin just to loosen it up, and now I'm going to roll this out to the desired size. So today I'm using a 9-inch tart pan, but this recipe would easily make for even an 11-inch tart, so you don't need to worry about the quantity. As for the excess tart though, you can certainly bake that into cookies. It'll still be absolutely delicious. Now I've transferred the tart dough onto my pan, and it's super soft and there are lots of gaps, but you don't need to worry, we're going to patch it all up and it won't even be visible in the final product. So once we've got an even tart coverage all over our pan, we're just going to go ahead and remove the excess from the top with the help of a rolling pin, because that will help us get very neat edges. Now as you can see, this pastry is very soft at this stage, so we're just going to crimp it with the help of a fork, and then we're going to refrigerate this for another 30 minutes before this goes in the oven. So after about 30 minutes, we're going to start preheating our oven in the meanwhile. I'm just using an extra bit of precaution to ensure that the pastry does not puff up, and for that I have a layer of parchment paper, and then I'm adding some beans. I'm using chickpeas today, but you can use baking beans, even rice or kidney beans works perfectly here. And this just helps ensure that our pastry does not puff up too much. It's that added insurance. You can totally skip this step. Crimping the pastry with the help of a fork should still work perfectly. So now this goes in a preheated oven for about 15 minutes. After which, we're just going to remove the beans and then bake this for another 5 minutes, and then our tart shell would more or less be ready for the filling. So after another 5 to 7 minutes, our tart shell is cooked. We're going to set this aside and let this cool. In the meanwhile, we'll prepare our filling, for which I have some fresh cream, to which I'm adding some sugar, and I'm also going to add a little bit of milk. The milk is just going to help get a lighter tart, which is not going to be too heavy or too dense. So we're going to heat that mixture until it comes to a boil, and in the meanwhile, in a separate bowl, we'll add some dark chocolate, a little bit of coffee powder, some butter and some vanilla extract. And once our milk and cream mixture comes to a boil, we'll add that to the chocolate. And as you can see, it was quite hot and there's a lot of steam. We're going to let our chocolate and butter sit in this mixture for about 2 minutes before we start whisking it all together. So after about 2 minutes, as you can see, the butter's almost melted completely. We'll start whisking this all through. This process is very similar to making a chocolate ganache, except it's not going to be as thick or as rich. at this stage, but it's still going to be very chocolatey, so you don't need to worry about the flavor. That I assure you. And as you can see, this has turned into a beautiful, glossy, satiny mixture. It's just perfect as is, but we're going to lighten this tart a little more just with the help of a couple of eggs. So I've just beaten them lightly with a fork, and we're adding these eggs so that our tart would not be too heavy or too dense. We don't want to make just a chocolate ganache because, as tasty as that might sound, it does get a little too rich, and after a couple of bites, you won't feel like having more. But that's not the case with this tart. It's absolutely amazing. So I've gone ahead and added the filling to our pre-baked tart shell, and after giving it a tap on the countertop to get rid of air bubbles, we're going to bake this in a preheated oven. The details are in the description box below. So our tart is finally out of the oven, but now for the tough part, we need to wait for about 2 hours to let it cool completely. And after 2 hours, our chocolate tart is ready to be served. It is absolutely divine and looks so amazing. I'm not going to jazz it up with anything, it really does not require anything. And the simplicity of this tart just makes it all the more appealing to me. As for the pastry, as you can see, it is glorious. It almost felt like a disaster at one point with all the patchwork, but you can see the edges are perfect. It is just amazing, and I have no other words for it. So all I'm going to do now is slice into the star to get myself a well-earned piece. It is so delicious. I'm salivating even right now just at the sight of it. It is so glorious. I have no words to describe how amazing this tart is. I really hope that you give this tart a try. I'm sure you'd be completely blown away. I hope you found this recipe to be useful, and if you did, then please do give a like, do share and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And as always, thank you so very much for watching, and I'm gonna see you next week.